Hi everyone. In this video, we'll be going over some key dates and reminders for the 2021 CII. The three dates left for the survey submission this year are April 30th, which is the due date for your initial submission, so that first submission from the Qualtrics database or online tool. The second due date or key date is June 11th, and that's the last day to schedule a review call. And the third key date is June 18th, when all the review data is due. And we will go over each of these dates over the next couple of slides. So the first due date is 4/30, April 30th, and that's when your submission is due. Each company will receive submission confirmation via email, and in that email, you'll receive a link to our online platform that we use to schedule calls called Calendly. You click on that link and it will open up a calendar on your web browser. That calendar is connected to my calendar. It will tell you when I'm available and our team here is available for a call. So choose the dates and times that work for you, and let Calendly know that that is the time you choose. We will then receive an email telling us that you chose that date, and we'll respond by sending you a calendar invite for your call. Attached to the calendar invite will be your preliminary rating documents, which we will review during our call. And those documents will only be available to you once you schedule the call date. So I advise you to schedule your calls as soon as possible to get those documents, review them with your teams, and also get the date that works for you, since other companies will also be looking at dates that work for them as well. The review time is limited to 1 hour per participating companies. We are usually very flexible here at HACR in giving our time to companies, but given the unprecedented number of companies interested in participating in the CII this year and the very constrained timelines that we are dealing with due to our normal deadlines, and the fact that your final ratings are tied together to a specific date, and I'll go over that a little later, we need to make sure that everyone is getting the hour that they need. So and being able to be flexible with everyone that participates so that everyone gets that hour of time. And so we're very being a little more strict than normal in limiting that amount of time to 1 hour per participant. Anyone is welcome to attend the call. So while we will send the calendar invite to the person who scheduled the call, please feel free to forward that email to whoever within the company that you would like to attend the call as well. We welcome everyone to participate, particularly stakeholders and those who were part of the process of filling out the survey. During the call, we will discuss your preliminary rating and opportunity areas. What we call opportunity areas are those areas where you didn't receive any or full credit for your response. What we do is we go over why we think that this question is important to your diversity inclusion practices or benchmarking them. We go over the importance of practices and potentially even what we have seen as best practices from other companies taking the survey over the years, what they have been in this area, and go over any challenges that you may be facing in implementing these practices, and provide some advice if we can on what can be done in implementing these over the next year. There are 25 practice areas that we go over, and normally 5 outcomes for each pillar. And I say normally 5 outcomes because this year the outcomes assessment will be a little different. And there are 4 pillars in total. Usually we take 15 minutes per pillar, which gives us the hour with review and conversation. So the outcomes threshold will be calculated after we receive all of the company's feedback and any changes to responses. Normally what we do is we set a benchmark for each of the 4 or 5 outcomes assessment items that we use to determine that 5th star in your 5-star rating. And that benchmark is calculated based on previous year responses. So we will use 3 years worth of responses to determine where exactly is corporate America with these practices and outcomes, and determine, okay, this is where the minimum percentage that corporate America can take right now while implementing all of these best practices. But as we all know, 2020 was a very different year, and we think it's unfair to hold companies to practices and outcomes that were the norm or standard prior to 2020, given everything that has happened. But at the same time, we don't know what to reestablish those benchmarks as, because we don't have the data on how 2020 has impacted many of our companies' practices. So in order to do that, we need to first gather all the information from companies participating this year. So your preliminary rating will look pretty much the same in many ways. We will still go over your practice assessment or your multiple choice questions. But your outcomes assessment, while we will calculate the percentages as we always do, you won't know how that compares to a benchmark percentage because there won't be one yet. Once we receive all your responses by that June 18th date, we will then calculate percentages and benchmarks based on the overall participant population's averages. And then that will establish the benchmark for this year and next year, until we figure out what the new norm is in terms of these outcomes going forward. There are COVID questions. You all may have noticed as you're taking the survey, there are COVID questions or questions related to events in 2020 at the end of each of the major sections for our 4 pillars: employment, procurement, philanthropy, and governance. These questions don't impact your rating. They're completely voluntary, as all questions are within the survey, and we will be using them to inform the theme for this year's report. So do expect to see what your peers on average are saying about these questions and responses in the report this year. A follow-up after your 1-hour call with us, a follow-up email is usually sent to you within 24 hours, recapping what we talked about and any of the questions that you would like to review. From the receipt of that email, you'll have a 1-week time period to get us that information back to us. And that is if, there is a 1-week time period between the day that you had the call and the June 18th deadline. If there's less than a week for whatever reason from your call to that June 18th deadline, then you'll have a little less than a week, since we will be creating the benchmarks right after the 18th for everyone for their final ratings. So as I said, this is the outcomes table that you usually see in each of the 4 pillar pages. These are the tables that will, where you see the red circles, those are the areas where you'll see a difference in your preliminary rating. You'll see text or language that describes or tells you that we won't be able to calculate these percentages until we finish the entire survey cycle. So that do expect to see some changes there. Everything else will be pretty much the same. Question numbers will be there. Response percentages based on your given responses this year will be there as well. And meets criteria, what you'll see this year, they're going to be just all X's because there is no benchmark to compare them to. But once we have all that information, those will change to X's and check marks, depending on what your response is and how that compares to the calculated benchmarks for this year. So yes, after we receive everything and create all of the final rating documents, we will finalize and send your primary and secondary POCs, which are identified in the survey this year at the very beginning in the first couple of sections of the survey. Those two POCs will receive the final ratings for this year. Um, by early July, I mean, I think that we would probably get them out a little bit earlier, but just to hedge the likelihood that something may delay us, by early July, the latest, you should receive these final ratings. If you have any questions, of course, contact us at research@hacr.org. Feel free to reach out to me as well at elopez@hacr.org. Thank you, and look forward to talking to you all in the coming weeks.